items for decision today, which I'm going to present to the full board for consideration. In 2014, we approved a change to the TVA bylaws adopting gender-neutral language. For example, the chairman was replaced with the term chair, and I tell all my friends in Alabama that I'm the first chair of the Tennessee Valley Authority. We did not attempt to immediately incorporate the change in all governance documents in favor of addressing the issue as documents were revised or revisited. Last quarter, the Nuclear Oversight Committee made some changes to the committee charter and adopted the gender-neutral language there. Although we do not have additional charter changes at this time, the four remaining committees, Audit, Finance, External Relations, and People, have looked at the gender-neutral terminology individually and are recommending we go ahead and incorporate the changes in each committee charter at this time. Rather than approach this matter during each committee report, I'm going to move a resolution that all of them be approved at one time. The resolutions incorporating revisions to these committee charters and copies of the revised charters behind tab 4 in your notebook. Is there a motion to approve the four resolutions behind tab 4?
I move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Do we have any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to comment. As the first chairman of the Nuclear Oversight Committee, I was particularly pleased to make this revision to our charter a few months ago. And now I'm very pleased that we're making the revision across all the charters of our committees here in Chattanooga, which is the location of Dr. Barbara Haskew's home. Barbara Haskew was a member of the board for many years, and she in fact was the person most instrumental in bringing this issue to our attention and insisting that we address it. So I just wanted to tell Barbara, thank you very much, and we are following through. The job's done, or will be done when we vote appropriately, correct?
Correct. All in favor? Are there any other comments? All in favor of approving the item behind tab 4?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Next, the board has spent some time reviewing the board practices, and the board, led by the audit committee, is proposing that we add a board practice specific to the handling of confidential information. While the board's general policy is to be open and transparent with information and data, from time to time we deal with confidential information. The board takes the topic of information security very seriously and asks management to work with us on the development of tools, both procedural and technological, to safeguard sensitive information. The Audit Committee is technical lead on developing these board practice rules applicable to these communications. The practice recommended by the committee includes a number of common sense steps aimed at reducing risk, and Lynn would like you to help us go through this topic.
Thank you, Joe. I just want to add that the committee felt strongly that we need to balance the public's interest in transparency with the business need for confidentiality under certain circumstances. The audit committee members all felt that this draft practice proposes an appropriate balance between the two matters. In crafting the board policy, we also emphasized the need for periodic training on the topic to ensure that we retain compliance.
Thank you, Lynn. If approved, this practice will be posted on the website where the public can view all of our board practices. The proposed board practice on confidential information is located behind tab 5 in your notebook. Do we have a motion to approve the practice?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving the item behind tab 5? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The item is approved. Lynn, would you like to proceed with the report of the Audit, Risk, and Regulation Committee?
Thank you, Joe. We have one item for consideration by the full board today. The committee this quarter had a very full agenda. We heard the detailed regular briefings we routinely consider regarding TVA's financial statements, enterprise risk, and regulatory assurance. Each quarter, we tend to focus on at least one or two specialized topics associated with these responsibilities. And this quarter, we talked more about the TVA Disclosure Control Committee, one of the tools TVA uses to achieve accuracy and transparency in its reporting of financial information. Section 10 of the TVA Act vests broad discretion in the TVA board to establish terms and conditions and rules and regulations related to the sale of TVA power. TVA carries out an important regulatory role involving local power companies that distribute TVA power. These provisions are designed to ensure that electric systems are operated for the benefit of electric ratepayers and that power is sold at rates as low as feasible. We do this primarily through the wholesale power contract. The committee is interested in making sure that local power companies are compensated for the use of electric system assets in a manner that is consistent with the wholesale power contract. Management has worked with the committee to develop a proposal related to the rates charged to these entities that attach to electric system assets for communications purposes. This proposal ensures that electric ratepayers are not subsidizing other business activities. And at this time, I'd like to thank Greg Williams, Chair of TVPPA, for commenting this morning and expressing the association's support of this proposal. And now I would like to ask Dwayne Lanier, TVA's Vice President of Operational and Regulatory Assurance, to present the recommendation. Dwayne?
Thank you, Director Evans. And let me be the first to greet you, Chair Rich. As Bill mentioned before, and as Director Evans just mentioned, I'm here today to recommend to the board for full approval a refined pole attachment rate methodology, as well as the delegation of the implementation details to the CEO for its implementation. As a matter of background, as the exclusive retail rate regulator for local power companies in the TVA region, we continually evaluate our regulatory position, our policies, and our processes. And as doing so, we recognize that the pole attachment regulation was in need of review and refinement. The focus of that review was intended to be around ensuring consistency of approach across the valley, as well as Director Evans mentioned before, to prevent the subsidization of the non-electric activities by ratepayers. The scope of this effort really was focused at this point on communications attaches, as there are other elements that will be reviewed in the future. So, given that evaluation, the staff has proposed that we allocate total costs of pole ownership based on space used or necessitated by the attaching parties. That is, each party would share in the cost of the pole and maintenance of that pole as if they were jointly constructing the pole. And secondly, we believe this is in line with our regulatory responsibilities, and it is a credible method that we believe we can stand behind. So with that, we are proposing the fully allocated cost methodology to the board for approval and the delegation of the detailed implementation steps to the CEO. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dwayne. If there are no questions, the committee has spent considerable time examining this topic with an emphasis on making sure electric ratepayers are treated fairly and safety standards are maintained. The committee has reviewed this item and recommends approval of the resolution behind tab 7 in your notebook. And Mr. Chair, I make a motion for the approval of the resolution.
Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? I actually have a couple of comments, and I know we've had these conversations, but it's my understanding this is a work in process because we're going to learn many things as we try to implement these rules. So we may find that things change as time goes on, as we all know, data, cable, multiple other organizations. services that are hanging on those poles. So we look forward to this process going in play and appreciate you keeping us informed as changes are made. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, Joe, since my husband and his law firm deal with this issue on a regular basis, I've chosen not to participate in any of the discussions that have surrounded this and will be recusing myself from voting today on this issue.
Thank you for that information. All in favor, any other discussion? All in favor of approving the item behind tab 7? Aye. Any opposed? Item is passed.
I would like to express appreciation to Richard Moore and his OIG staff, Richard, Randy Gregson from Ernst & Young, Diane Ware, Dwayne Lanier, and John Hoskins, all of whom made presentations to the committee, and our committee secretary, Cliff Beach, who keeps us documented. I would also like to thank my fellow directors, Ron Walter and Eric Satz, for their valuable contributions to the committee and its work. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report of the Audit, Risk, and Regulation Committee.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership of that very complicated committee. You did an outstanding job. Our next item is the report of the Finance, Rates, and Portfolio Committee. Committee Chair Pete Mahurin will present the report. If for some reason he disappears on us, Mike is prepared to take over. Pete?
I hope I haven't disappeared on you, Mr. Chair.
You're still with us.
The committee does not have any action items for consideration today, but I would like to call on our Chief Financial Officer, John Thomas, to provide us an update on the financial condition.
Good morning. Happy to present TVA's first quarter of the fiscal year results. Bill gave some of the highlights in his president's report, and I'll cover some of the details, but just to recap, net income was $37 million loss for the year, and so that is typical for the first quarter of the year. However, last year we actually did have a rather significant net income, and that was because of the cold weather that we experienced. I'll talk a bit more about the weather on the next slide. Our overall operating expenses were pretty much in line with budget. Again, I'll talk about more details about where we had favorability and unfavorability. Overall interest expense was favorable. That's because we came into the year with lower debt than what we had anticipated because of performance last year, as well as continued low interest rates. So to talk just for a second about the weather, it seems like each year this time I'm showing this chart talking about the extremes and how we budget normal weather, and I guess maybe it averages normal over time, but this year we did have one of the mildest degree days. So because this is one of those shoulder quarters, we would have had some cooling degree days at the early part of the quarter and obviously heating degree days at the end of the quarter. So this considers both of those. Needless to say, it was the mildest first quarter going back to 1962. You can see the 880 degree days there, significantly off from the 1369 that would be normal, and certainly in sharp contrast to the 1443 that we saw last year. So moving into the income statement, as you would expect, our revenue was down $138 million. In terms of the overall O&M, you can see $9 million favorable. What we call direct controllable business unit expenditures were $20 million favorable, and then some unfavorability in projects, specifically some of the work we're doing around the clearing for the Google project, as well as some of the Boone remediation work that we're doing there. That drove that $11 million unfavorable. But overall net, $9 million favorable to plan. Under depreciation and taxes, you can see $20 million favorable. That's really associated with the license extension at Sequoia. And so we're recording less depreciation expense than what we had expected. And then lastly, I did mention interest expense. I do believe I usually talk about interest expense, but we're $18 million favorable this year. So overall, I would say reasonably close to plan, and certainly given the amount of impact of revenue, I think pretty good first quarter. But again, it's very early in the year. Going on to the impact on the statement of cash flow, you can see operating cash flow pretty much on plan. Just remember that that revenue shortfall that we experienced in the first quarter will show up in operating cash flow in the second quarter. So that's where we'll be challenged to cover the cash aspect of that. In terms of our overall investing, You can see $134 million ahead of plan. This is pretty much timing. Some of this associated with Watts Bar 2, some of this associated with some of the other timing of capital projects in the year. We expect to be on plan for capital for the full year this year. So because of the first quarter impacts, we did see slightly more investing than what we anticipated, so $151 million. If you look at overall total financing obligations, $238 million favorable. Again, we did do more financing in the first quarter than we anticipated, but we came into the year in a favorable position. So overall, still on plan for the year is what I would expect, but we'll see how the summer unfolds. So in summary, low electricity sales because of the weather, low fuel cost for the quarter, and overall, I would say reasonably on plan for the year. I'll be happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you, John. The weather conditions have been a little tougher so far this year. I appreciate the effort of TVA in taking to stay on sound fiscal footing. I also appreciate the support of the Chip Pardee that provides the committee on issues focused on strategic topics around the financial plan and generation fleet. This concludes the report of the Finance, Rate, and Portfolio Committee.
Thank you, Pete. Our next agenda item is a report from the Board's Nuclear Oversight Committee. The report will be presented by committee chair.
Thank you very much, Joe. We do not have any recommendations to present to the board today. We did meet in January. The committee met in January when Chief Nuclear Officer Joe Grimes gave a presentation on the performance of the nuclear fleet. The fleet has performed consistently across a range of metrics, of operational indicators, but it does have some continued issues and challenges, particularly at the Sequoia site. So we have asked Joe to keep the management team appraised of progress and any additional issues and challenges that might arise. We're committed the board is committed to its oversight role, and I would again like to express my appreciation to Sam Collins, who provides our external advice. He's an independent nuclear expert that we rely on. He provides valuable analysis and information on an ongoing basis to the committee, so thank you, Sam. Also at our January meeting, Mike Skaggs provided us with an update about the Watts Bar Unit 2 construction project. The unit continues to progress forward, is performing many of the pre-operational tests required as part of a very complicated and protracted power ascension program. I'd like to express my appreciation for all the hard work of staff at that unit, the TVA employees and their contractors, as we head toward a commercial operation. And finally, I would like to congratulate Bill Johnston, who has been elected to a leadership position with the World Association of Nuclear Operators. WANO is the name of that organization. My notes indicate that Bill has been elected as chairman of the Regional Operation Unit of the WANO, and so I am sure that as he takes hold of this new role, he will bring gender equity appreciation to this international audience as well. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. WANO organization.
Thank you, Marilyn, and that will be my first order of business. And of course, I'll have to get that translated into about 17 different languages. WANO is the World Association of Nuclear Operators. If you own and operate a nuclear plant in the world, you're a member of this organization. It is the global version of INPO, which is the domestic version, and it's got a very simple mission, which is to assure and seek the highest levels of nuclear safety and public safety in the operation of nuclear plants. It's quite interesting to see how we do things in this country compared to other places. I say this with no hubris or bias. The United States is the leader in nuclear operations in both terms of safety, production, environmental stewardship. So it's good to be able to say that. It's also good to see what others around the world are doing. So thank you, Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Bill. You mentioned that the U.S. is leadership in nuclear operations. I think that the leadership we have here at TVA is world-class as well. I'm sure that we'll benefit from your involvement in WANU, and before concluding my report, I would like to acknowledge the role of the other committee members. That's Richard Howarth, Gina Lodge, and Joe Rich.
Thank you, Marilyn. Are there any questions or comments?
Comment if I could, Jay. I just want to take a moment to emphasize the elements of oversight that are involved with TVA's nuclear fleet, along with our committee, that there are NSRB, INPO, WANO, the IG's office. It's a huge host of abbreviations that work hard to make sure that the nuclear fleet runs safely. I'd like to express my appreciation to all of these groups and to TVA's nuclear employees for focusing on plant safety. I tell you, I sleep better at night knowing how many layers of oversight there are under the program.
Bill, I also think your election, I believe there were 5 governors, is that correct? The fact that one from TVA was picked, I think that reflects the respect that the industry has for TVA. So thank all of you on the nuclear side, but also thank you for your participation. I think it helps carry the great message of TVA and its competence.
I do think the election said a lot about the progress we've made in our nuclear program, which we intend to continue. But thank you for that, Joe.
Any other comments? Our next agenda item is the report of the this report. Mike.
Thanks, Chair Joe. Dwayne, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Something occurred to me that while you were just going through that. Do our crews attach the pole? If there's an attachment to the pole, is it our crews or is it the local crews or is it both?
The pole attachments that we're referring to are the poles of the local power companies. So it would be the local power company crews
That do all the attachments?
Yes.
Okay.
They would manage that with the telecommunications attachers.
Okay, thank you. Joe, we heard updates from management on several customer topics, the economic development program and TVA's technology initiatives. The Regional Energy Resource Council, one of TVA's federal advisory committees, met in Memphis late last month to gather stakeholder input. Being in Memphis, Ron and Lynn both got to meet and talk with members of the council. And would either of you like to give a report on what y'all did while y'all were there?
Thank you, Mike. Tess Rogers, chair of the RERC, is here this morning. Tess, please stand for just a second. Thank you for being here. It was a good opportunity to meet with stakeholders. And without a doubt, Lynn and I learned a lot. We also had the honor to make a tribute to our good friend Clifford Stockton, who was a member of the RERC at the time of his death. His widow, Lois Jean, was there and expressed her gratitude to the RERC and TVA for our support during that difficult time in her life.
Thank you, Ron. In addition, management updated the committee on a number of topics related to public land management. TVA plays a significant role in this area across the valley, and while it may not receive public attention that the power program receives, I do hear from stakeholders frequently about these issues. We heard reports regarding our public land protection efforts. These are our efforts to address encroachers or individuals who abuse these public lands. We also reviewed information about TVA's floating house policy, and we will be considering this item for action at the next board meeting, so please stay tuned. That, Mr. Chair, concludes the report of the External Relations Committee.
Thank you, Chair Mike.
Thank you, Joe. I'm overall glad to be back, and happy to have the really seriously continue to have the honor to serve the people of the Tennessee Valley and the LPCs that we work with, and and this terrific board, if I may say so, and the staff. They're all doing great right now. I'm sure that'll change sometime soon.
What, you know something we don't?
No. Just kidding, just kidding. We have one action item today, but before that, I'd like to take a minute to recognize an important member of our audience, Kathy Black. Kathy, if you would stand while I embarrass you for just a little bit. Kathy is the TVA's Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Communications. She's retiring, and tomorrow is her last day of work. Although somebody told me that you actually don't plan to come in tomorrow. And I understand it's your last day of work. You have been such a pleasure to work with, and I know that that's a thought that's shared by hundreds, if not thousands of people that you've worked with over the past 30 years.
Since you were 10.
We will miss you. You're a true TVA champion. Good luck, and I'm sure you were looking forward to spending time with your husband Al and the grandkids. Kathy's sister, if you would introduce your sister, who was here today. She didn't know that was coming. You made a mistake of...
On a special occasion, my sister Colleen came to be with me. She lives in Wyoming. Long trip to get here, and we intend to have a lot of fun.
Kathy and her sister both have these Boston accents. And they live in Tennessee and Wyoming, and I'm sure they get a lot of funny remarks from people like me. So, anyway, thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you.
Do acknowledge the other people who served on this committee, Lynn Evans, Pete Muir, and Jenna Lodge, who do terrific work. I think we do that not just to sort of praise them, but to let the public know who these people are and what you do. We have a we believe that we have a strongly diverse workforce, and one that supports diversity of thought, background, and culture. That thought, background, and culture will make a stronger TVA. We applaud management's efforts in these areas and know this work will continue. This conversation can sometimes boil down to numbers and programs, but each of us became somewhat emotional as we discussed our experiences and, more importantly, our hopes for TVA in this area. We believe employees perform best when they are comfortable and feel accepted at work, where there is open respect for the dignity of all employees. And we encourage TVA leadership to continue to work to make sure that all employees feel safe and accepted here. Other comments for others on this issue? Okay, here, okay. Our one recommendation concerns the selection of a chair. The committee has a chair of the board, that is. The committee has discussed this matter in some depth in accordance with the procedures set out in the board practice on selection of a chair. At this time, the committee recommends that Director Joe Rich continue as chair of the board for an additional term. There is much that we can say about the leadership that you provided, Joe, but I think it will suffice to say we respect and admire the thought and effort that you have put into addressing every issue that has come in front of this board in the last 2 years, and the benefit that your leadership has brought to TVA. The chair is selected for a 2-year term, and Joe's term as a director is currently scheduled to end before his term as chair would end. We will obviously have to continue to closely monitor this situation, but we should have ample opportunity to deal with any potential issues in a timely manner. The People and Performance Committee submits Joe Rich as nominee for the chair of the TVA board. Individual directors are also entitled to make nominations, other nominations. Are there further nominations for chair of the board? If not, the nominations are closed, and I would move in favor of Joe Rich as chair for a term of May 19, 2016 to May 18, 2018. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. I need to recite the conclusion of the vote for the record, that this was a unanimous vote. Congratulations, Joe. That concludes the report of the People and Performance Committee.
First, I do appreciate the honor, this opportunity to serve again, because I've had an opportunity to work with some of the best people and the hardest working people you could ever imagine as the people I sit around with this board, and the management and the employees from the top to the bottom of TVA. They're a special group, and I don't think you can really appreciate, I know the TVA people do, what it means to be connected to TVA, but I think we've all found that to be something special. I think sometimes it's forgotten that this isn't the only time the board gets together is when the spotlight's on, but there are dozens of committee meetings, there are phone calls, there are listen and learn sessions on many of the Fridays so we can learn about some of the issues that faces the TVA on a daily basis. And the amount of time these individuals put into this is extraordinary, and they are truly public servants. So I know that any of you could do this job probably much better than I could ever do it, but I do appreciate the opportunity to serve again. I hope I get to stay for 2 years. If not, I will watch you on the internet. That concludes our committee reports. A few other points. First, Mary Margaret, Rebecca, Jeff, and there are many others that bring this together so that it works. I know it looks like we do all the work, but believe it or not, there are others that make us look much better. And also, Kathy, I had the opportunity, particularly in the last few years, in compensation issues, work with you. You've been a truly big asset for TVA. You will be missed. I see you have a party today at 1 o'clock. It doesn't mean you go home at 3. And I don't recall anyone saying you couldn't be here tomorrow, so maybe you should plan on Monday rather than tomorrow. Is there any other business, any other discussion, comments? There being no further business with no objections, my colleagues, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.